Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Auditor General of Canada released a follow-up report Tuesday on government spending in areas of First Nation primary health care, safe drinking water, and emergency management. The report finds that although Indigenous Services Canada increased spending in these areas by 84% since 2019, it made satisfactory progress on less than half the auditor's previous recommendations. APTN's Fraser Needham starts us off tonight.
Auditor General Karen Hogan says the federal government needs to look at new and improved ways of delivering services to First Nations people.
Sustained focus from Indigenous Services Canada to rethink how it delivers programs while collaborating with First Nations to improve their capacity is an important step to resolving these persistent issues, improve outcomes, and advance reconciliation.
Her report finds a number of problems with the way Indigenous Services delivers primary health care, safe drinking water, and emergency services to First Nations. This includes, in spite of repeated promises to eliminate all long-term drinking water advisories, 35 remained in place at the time of the report, including 9 that were over a decade long. Since 2016, no assessment of whether First Nations were receiving comparable primary health care services to non-First Nations. Only a handful of emergency services agreements between the federal government, First Nations, and the provinces, and failure to meet staffing targets for healthcare services on First Nations. Hogan says in particular the status quo is not working when it comes to the provision of emergency services.
But in the absence of having agreements and knowing exactly who will do what in an emergency, it leaves a lot of uncertainty and concern in First Nations communities. So I think that the Indigenous Services Canada really needs to rethink how they're approaching this. They're doing a lot of engagement with First Nations communities, but really trying to do the old engagement and come out with a different outcome. And I think it's time they rethink how they approach stuff.
At a press conference after the release of the auditor's report, Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Galmasti said progress has been made in some areas, such as significantly reducing the number of long-term boil water advisories, but work remains to be done.
So there are some things in the report, that are a guidepost for us. We're going to continue working on this. It is a pathway forward. We will be responding with an action plan, of course. That's the next critical step. But I really want to highlight that this report also points to a lot of critical work at the community level. And that's where ESC is moving towards.
That concludes today's press conference.
Auditor General reports and recommendations are non-binding on government. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
3 men wrongfully convicted for killing a Winnipeg chef in 1973 have filed separate settlement claims against the City of Winnipeg. The city's policy committee reviewed the claims today, and as TR Wheatley shows us, the men are one step closer to getting what's owed to them after spending 50 years behind bars.
Settlement of actions of Brian Anderson, Alan John Woodhouse, and Clarence Clifford Woodhouse. From the
Winnipeg City Council's Executive Policy Committee discusses whether or not to move forward on a $7 million settlement for 3 men from the Penei-Mutang First Nation. Before the vote, Councillor Ross Eady asked if the Court of King's Bench had any involvement.
Bench be making decisions that there was inappropriate police procedure and stuff that resulted in our liability of $7 million for these 3.
The court ordered new trials after the Innocence Canada legal team raised serious questions about the way Winnipeg police officers and a senior Crown attorney fabricated evidence. The city's acting director of legal services, Ashley Pledger, went on to explain that this past July, a dispute resolution process was done through court.
It's on a without prejudice basis, and so there would not be a finding of liability.
All 3 men plus a 4th man who died in 2011 were found guilty of killing Chef Ting Fong Chan while he was walking home from work in 1973. In 2023, Brian Anderson and Alan Woodhouse were acquitted. Then in 2024, a new trial was granted for Clarence Woodhouse. He was also acquitted. Now all 3 are suing the City of Winnipeg for their police department's involvement in their wrongful convictions, always maintaining their innocence. Saying they were forced to sign confessions, the problem all were Soto speakers and didn't understand English. On top of that, they say they were assaulted by Winnipeg police, and when on trial, they faced an all-white jury. The 3 separate claims against the city all allege 5 different causes of action: negligence in investigation, false arrest and false imprisonment, misfeasance in public office, conspiracy, and charter violations. The men have also filed claims against the federal and provincial governments.
$7 million is a contribution towards a global settlement with contributions from the other defendants being Canada and Manitoba,
Right.
yes.
And when do those get announced, or when do we know about those?
Unfortunately, those are subject to settlement privilege, so we won't know about those.
Both the federal and provincial government have policies which allows them to keep settlements private. Mayor Scott Gillingham speaks to the difference in how the city handles its business.
It feels like it's done in a black box. We don't hear about it. But here at the City of Winnipeg, we have a public meeting with a public report that members of the public can come and speak to in a very open and transparent way.
With that, the mayor voted to move it forward.
So I'll call the question now on number 8. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you. Thank you very
It
much.
now moves to a full council
We'll
vote
move
at a
on now
later
to the
date,
proposed
moving one step
amendments.
closer to redemption for the 3 men from Penay Mutang. Tia Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
In 2018, APTN's Chris Stewart reported from the Big Stone Cree Nation in northern Alberta about the chief and most of the band council voting to give themselves large bonuses for signing oil agreements. And now, 7 years later, Chris is back in Big Stone with a look at what the current administration is doing to help its 9,000 plus members.
Chief Andy Alec was elected in 2022, a first-time chief. In 2018, then Chief Gordon Auger had given a $60,000 bonus to himself and most council members for signing an oil deal. This upset many band members. APTN asked Chief Andy Alec if the current leadership were giving themselves any bonuses. So no bonuses?
No bonuses.
He says the leadership is working to implement services to each of their 3 communities and off-site members.
We've really wanted to work together with our membership in asking what do you want to see within this term and for the future of Big Stone. You know, so we've been looking at a lot of the different communities, Chipewyan Lake, Calling Lake, Wabasca, and there hasn't always been equitable programs or services, and really taking a look at the nation as a whole and figuring out how we can positively move forward in developing programs and services that are accessible from all membership.
39 new housing units are nearly ready for homeowners to move in. He says the selection process will be unbiased.
So there is a fair and equitable process that we're trying to improve. I know perception is that chief and council have influence in who gets housing and whatnot, but in this case, that's not what we do.
The community is doing well financially with oil and gas revenue, forestry, and band-owned businesses across the province.
There's annual programs, annual services that people can submit for, whether it's ramps, renovations, housing. There's another way that we can improve quality of life, and it's important that the membership is aware of what dollars are coming in from industry, how these dollars can be used, and which gaps can be filled with existing programs and services.
A new K-12 school opened a year ago with all the latest technology. The nation connected natural gas to the community of Sandy Lake, and have broken ground on a new multi-story apartment building to help with housing issues. Plans are underway for a potential youth and senior centers. Chief Alec's 4-year term runs out next year, and he says he plans to run again. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Big Stone Cree Nation, Alberta.
And Chris will have more from Big Stone Cree Nation tomorrow. Time now for a quick break. Coming up, why an 8-year-old is running from his First Nation to Kenora, Ontario. Stick around. Welcome back. A young First Nation boy from northwestern Ontario is taking his family's housing situation into his own hands by running 70 kilometers to raise awareness for homelessness. Sav Jonesa caught him at the end of his journey and has this report.
While most people wouldn't like to go running in the rain, this 8-year-old boy couldn't be happier to do it.
I like running.
Chavi Williamson is running from his home in Grassy Narrows First Nation to the city of Kenora, Ontario. He's making the 70-kilometer trek by foot to bring awareness to the lack of housing in his community.
I'm running for my family, so we don't get kicked out of our house. We gotta get a new home.
Chavi's family has been struggling with chronic housing instability. They were recently approved by Chief and Council to live in a family services building until they found suitable permanent housing. But after only a month, they were told to find somewhere else to live because the agency needs the residents back. Without many alternatives to choose from, Chavi, his parents, and baby sister are struggling to find a place they can call their own before they're evicted.
He's concerned about her. And that's what he said to me, like, I'm worried about my little sister being homeless, and I'm worried that she's going to end up out in the cold.
Chavi's grandfather, Robert Williamson, has been at his side throughout his 5-day journey. Robert says the only option for Chavi's family is a dilapidated house that requires extensive renovation, which will take months to complete, all to be paid out of pocket through fundraising and hopeful reimbursement. Robert says the lack of housing in Grassy Narrows affects more than just his loved ones.
I understand that there's a lot of people that are in the same situation, and I support them, and I hope Chavi's run brings that to attention by the right people.
He says despite an announcement of 100 homes coming to the First Nation over the next several years, the demand is so great they've already been assigned to others, and Chavi's family didn't make the cut. At the end of his long run, Chavi was hoping to speak to his Member of Parliament, Eric Malillo, about the issue so it could be brought to the federal government, but his office was closed. In an emailed statement to APTN News, Malillo said in part that he will continue advocating for a plan to build more homes in the region. This crisis in northwestern Ontario remains a top priority for me and my Conservative colleagues, as thousands of people across the region are lacking a place to call home. Indigenous Services Canada did not get back to APTN News before airtime. We also wanted to hear from the Chief and Council about housing at Grassy Narrows. We haven't heard back from them either. Meanwhile, Chavi and his family say they will continue pushing so that everyone can have a safe place to live.
He is very determined, and I know there's not much he can do but support his family, and that I trust in him. His heart is, leads him, and he follows his heart.
Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Lightning Rock has always been a sacred place for the Sumas people. Finally, after years of legal disputes, it has been returned to the Sumas First Nation. Ryan Kenningham reports.
On Sunday, October 19th, the Sumas First Nation hosted a celebration to honor the return of the land surrounding Lightning Rock, one of the Sumas people's most sacred sites, named for the massive boulder that was split by a lightning strike and carries deep cultural and spiritual significance.
We realized that with the sacredness of the site, that we want to keep it as natural as possible. We haven't talked about restoration of any of the pit houses or any markings of the burial sites, because it's my understanding that there is a mass burial site from when the smallpox pandemic came through. So I think there's a lot of archaeological kind of work and assessment that needs to be done on this site prior to any decisions being made to what is happening, community consultation and working with our membership.
Lightning Rock is an ancestral burial site now located in the city of Abbotsford. Working with local officials and archaeologists, the site was officially returned to the nation on March 31st, 2025.
The protection of this site and the nature of it as a sacred place, as an ancient ancestral cemetery, as well as a place of a transformation that goes back to the deep, really beginnings of time and the creation stories here, that it's land that really can't be used, it's not to be disturbed.
For thousands of years, Lightning Rock was a burial ground and a place of ceremony, where ancestors were laid to rest and spiritual connections were maintained. Today, those ceremonies return to Lightning Rock and the Semeth people.
I believe that when it's done in a ceremonial way, that allows the ancestors to be with us, and there's healing that happens at all ceremonies. So I believe there will be a lot of healing happening today along with the ceremony.
Ryan Cunningham, APTN National News, Vancouver.
A new episode of Face to Face is coming up right after this newscast, and we're sitting down with an Oscar nominee. We'll have a preview after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And this could be a photo of the year candidate. How about this photo of Bear Lake near Fort Connolly, British Columbia, shared by Phyllis Charlie. Stunning stuff to say the least. Thanks, Phyllis. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 13 for Fredericton, cloudy and 17 for Halifax. 3 with rain in Kuujjuaq, cloudy and 4 for Nain. 14 with rain for Montreal, cloudy and 8 in Chibougamau. 10 for Sault Ste. Marie, cloudy and 13 for Ottawa. 5 in Kapuskasing, cloudy and 7 for Thunder Bay. 4 in God's Lake and Norway House. 7 for Winnipeg, cloudy and 8 for Dauphin. Sun's out and 11 for Regina and Swift Current. Sunny and 12 for Meadow Lake, 6 in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, sunny and 7 for Fort Chipewyan, 11 under sunny skies for Fort McMurray, 15 in Edmonton, sunny and 17 for Lethbridge. Showers and 15 for Vancouver, 13 for Kamloops. 11 for Prince George, rain and 5 for Smithers. -9 in Old Crow, 4 in Whitehorse. Montreal's Centaur Theatre recently presented the world premiere of Stone and Bone Spectacular. It's a new Indigenous play that reinvents the city's history. Kim Sullivan caught up with a couple of cast members during rehearsal just before the curtain rose.
The Centaur Theatre's first ever residency for Indigenous artists led to the creation of an original play, Stone and Bone Spectacular, that reinvents the history of Montreal and the very land the theatre sits on, all through a Mohawk perspective. Executive and Artistic Director Ida Holmes says that although Indigenous stories are an essential part of Montreal's heritage, they have been somewhat absent from the theatre's half-century of history.
We decided at Centaur that we needed to have a conversation around what was our role in being an active agent of change in the conversation.
The play is written by interdisciplinary stage artist Ange Loft and created in collaboration with choreographer Barbara Kenneratoni Daibo and artist Yante Foot. All three have a connection to Ganawage. Archaeology and art come together on stage with song, dance, puppets, and more. Mohawk artist Watsonzio Kirby plays two of these characters, Fortune and Heavy Lifter. They consider themselves privileged to be part of this cast.
To get to play someone who is Ganyak Gaha and to get to tell these stories from my homeland and from where I'm from, and getting to speak these truths on stage and getting to speak my language on stage in bits and pieces is something that I've dreamed of for a very long time.
The play truly gives life to parts of Montreal's Indigenous history.
I think this gets into the nitty-gritty of policy and of the history, and really giving a detailed scope of what exactly the movements were that our people went through. When it comes to going to Kahnawake or going to Ganesadage, and what caused those things to happen, really.
Véronique Yakwasianende Picard is Wendat and plays two dogs, a role that brings her nation closer to that of the Mohawks, two nations that, as the play also shows, have experienced historical conflicts with each other.
Je trouve que ça fait partie un petit peu aussi de la réconciliation entre nos deux nations. Je pense qu'on s'entend quand même bien, mais il reste parfois des fonds de cette histoire-là de chicane qui existent encore. Puis je pense qu'il y a des projets comme ça, ça contribue aussi à la réconciliation entre nos nations.
Stone and Bone Spectacular goes more than skin deep, to do more than just educate.
C'est du divertissement pur et dur, et ça bouge de partout. C'est burlesque, c'est humoristique, c'est émouvant, c'est une histoire d'amour, c'est romantique. Il y a de tout, là, vraiment. Mais c'est ça éduque en même temps.
The Centaur Theatre is also committed to welcoming Indigenous communities off stage. Inspired by the National Arts Centre's Indigenous Theatre, they are introducing the All My Relations ticket tier this season, a $15 ticket price reserved for Indigenous community members.
This is an amazing opportunity to broaden our connection to the people here, and to all of the artists and public that live here on this territory. So we've launched the All My Relations for the whole season.
What should the audience expect from this truly Indigenous play?
Expect the unexpected. I would say this play has everything, and it's so wild and it's such a whirlwind. Just be ready to strap in and go on this roller coaster ride with us.
Stone and Bone Spectacular is performed in English and runs until October 26 at Montreal's Centaur Theatre. Kim Sullivan, APTN National News, Montreal.
Oscar nominee and writer Julian Brave Noisecat is our guest on an all-new episode of Face to Face tonight. He's just released his first book, We Survived the Night. We also discussed Sugarcane, which was up for the Best Documentary Feature at this year's Academy Awards.
As I was saying, my first love, my first dream was to become a writer. So to become a filmmaker was itself a turn of events that I hadn't necessarily planned for. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, to have your first film that you've ever made. I mean, like I literally hadn't made a TikTok before we made Sugarcane. And, to have the first film that you've ever made go all the way, as far as films can go, was completely surreal. And the part about it for me that was especially, beautiful was to get to bring my dad along for the ride, and some members of my family as well, to see him on the red carpet in LA. I have this distinct memory of him with his like cowboy hat on with like Ariana Grande going in the back.
And you can catch our entire interview with Julian Brave Noisecat in just a few minutes from now. Actually, you can find an extended version of that interview later tonight on our APTN News YouTube page. Of course, for news anytime and the very latest, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And Creason will be here with your first look at the day's news tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's all the time we have for this Tuesday. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Have a great night.